I'm talking to Steve Gourlay, or Dr. Steve Gourlay of Actinogen. He's the CEO, recently appointed, and since he's been appointed, the share price is heading in the right direction. Let's just find out what this company does and what's the potential for it to actually kick the ultimate goal that all these sort of biotech companies are always looking for. Great to see you, mate.
Thanks, Peter.
So are you a biotech company or a biomed company?
We call ourselves a biotech company because that's the easiest category to understand. We're really a small pharmaceutical company pursuing a really interesting once-a-day small molecule or pill, if you like.
Okay. Who are you trying to help?
Patients with Alzheimer's traditionally have had very few medications to help them. In fact, there were a few medications that weren't very good approved about 20 years ago. And right now they're trying to approve amyloid antibodies, which attack what was thought to be the main biologic process in Alzheimer's, but doesn't really have much impact on your decline in Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so the current stuff out there isn't working all that well.
Not working that well, and we have a drug that we've shown actually improves people's cognitive performance on attention and memory as soon as 2 or 4 weeks after you take it.
Okay. So you're saying that someone who might have had memory problems that get better. They don't necessarily go back to where they were before, but there's certainly improvement, you're saying.
Yes, well, what we've actually shown in healthy older people over 50 is that by taking this medication compared to a placebo or sugar pill in a different group, your memory actually improves.
Yeah, so even healthy people have crappy memories, and I know that.
That's true. So we're not developing this for the healthy, over 50s amongst us.
Yeah.
But if this drug gave people independent living, for an additional 6 or 12 months or 18 months, that would be a really big impact. And potentially, we all have relatives who have memory impairment in their older age, older years. And if you have amyloid in your system and in your brain, the decline of your mental abilities is fairly rapid and predictable.
So you're fighting amyloid, are you?
We're fighting, amyloid is a biomarker of the disease, but it's probably...
Whatever that is.
Whatever that is. Well, it says you've got a particular disease that we know about.
Okay.
But attacking the amyloid doesn't seem to solve the problem.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is finding, with a completely different mechanism, a way to improve your abilities to live independently, think and remember things.
Okay. So what's the track record so far in the testing that you've done? Because ultimately, we know where you want to be. You want to actually show that people are improving.
Yep.
What are the positive signs and what are the obstacles that you have to overcome to really kick that goal?
Yep, sure. So I was lucky enough to join the company when they've already developed a lot of clinical data. So more than 200 patients and healthy volunteers have been studied, most of them for 12 weeks, which is a great safety database so that we know the molecule is safe. We know it's a low-dose pharmaceutical with low potential to interact with other drugs that a lot of people with Alzheimer's or getting older might take. So it's an excellent-looking pharmaceutical. It has been tested in a number of different ways in volunteers, testing different doses. And then there was a phase 2, we call it, Alzheimer's disease study of 185 people, randomized to the active molecule, Xanamem, for 12 weeks, or a placebo or a sugar pill.
Yeah.
That study was actually negative, but in looking back at those patients who were enrolled, a few of them almost certainly didn't have real Alzheimer's disease because the biomarkers weren't available back then when the study was commenced.
So they weren't really good candidates for the study?
Yes, and the endpoints used weren't the sensitive endpoints we're now using. And the study was only 12 weeks, so it was relatively short. So my view is that that's a false negative readout, if you like. And what we've shown more recently in healthy volunteers over 50 is that you can improve computerized memory and attention as soon as 2 weeks after you start taking the drug. So that we know the drug does work to improve cognition. What we're setting out to do now in the next study called Xanamem is to show that it works in Alzheimer's patients with a positive biomarker of the disease.
Okay, and how long will that take and how long before you get an answer about whether it's, I guess if you don't like false negatives, you'd like a true positive.
True positive. So, so we believe the study showing improved mental abilities is indeed a true positive.
Yeah, it's a good starting point.
And part of the reason we believe that is an old-fashioned drug that is not very specific and has too many side effects to be used. That also showed improvement in patients with diabetes in their ability to think. So this is not just an out-of-the-blue finding, it has a prior probability of being true. So what we're doing is repeating that study with 10 and 5 milligram doses, because we know these lower doses are going to be important for the future of the drug program.
Yeah.
And then we'll take that into a second part of the study in patients with Alzheimer's and show that these sensitive endpoints also improve cognition in patients. So by the time, so we'll see the first results from that study in the first part of next year, and then about a year later we'll be able to say our drug improves cognition or the ability to think in patients with Alzheimer's.
So if you get the feeling confidently that it works, you then have to basically go to America and get the approval of those very tough judges over there?
Well,
or not.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you develop a drug, even though we're based in Australia and doing our trials here in Australia, it's a very Australian story, we always do this typically under a US IND, which is we'll call the Investigational New Drug process, that we have an open IND for Alzheimer's, so the FDA is blessing everything that we do as we go along. And we'll be doing another IND for our second indication called Fragile X syndrome, which is the relatively rare form of autism. But yes, Alzheimer's is a graveyard for drug development. However, uniquely, we have a drug that we've already shown that it improves cognition. So it's a question of exactly how you do design the clinical trials in order to get the FDA's approval. And of course, we talk to them about that at each step of the way.
Yeah, and so are you perceiving this being a standalone company, or do you think once you get the FDA thumbs up, a lot of big companies will go chasing in?
It's possible that we could go either way.
So
if the agreement with the FDA and the European authority is such that the trials that they require for approval are not too big, then I think it's quite feasible that we could be an independent company and remain, develop into a larger pharmaceutical company based here in Australia, but with operations overseas. However, we're always talking to pharma partners and biotech partners, as you do, and if somebody wants to offer us a merger deal at some point in the future that makes sense to the board and to shareholders, that's also possible. Of course.
And what's the balance sheet like? Because obviously you're new to the business, came in March, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you want a balance sheet that will fund what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Is it in good shape?
Absolutely. So that's another nice thing for me as an incoming CEO. We have a balance sheet with 15.2 million in the bank as of the end of March. And that will fully fund this series of phase 2 studies, which will include the Xanamere study of Alzheimer's disease, the Xana-FX study of Fragile X, and a third indication that we'll be announcing in the next few weeks or months.
Okay. I always say when I'm trying to work out whether I want to invest in a company, do I like the industry, do I like the actual track record of the company, and do I like the management? So what's your track record in doing something like this? You're not an accountant who's just said, let's have a crack at this, I'm a CEO.
No.
What's your background?
Indeed, there are companies like that.
Yeah, of course.
My background, I'm a specialist physician trained in Melbourne with doing a PhD in clinical trials methods. Then went to the US, where I've spent most of my working career, initially at a little biotech called Genentech back in the 90s, where I was luckily associated with about half a dozen successful programs that are now making a real difference to patients. And did a stint as a venture investor back here in Australia, and then went to Principia Biopharma, where I was the founding CMO and led a small molecule program all the way through to phase 3 and another one into phase 2 for multiple sclerosis. So that company was sold to Sanofi for $3.6 billion recently.
Okay, so you've got a bit of a track record in this stuff. And have you put your own skin in the game?
Yes, I have. Prior to my appointment, there was a shortfall placement that I contributed $330,000 of my own money. This is something I did at Principia in the US as well. I put about $500,000 into that company in the early stages. I like to put
backing yourself.
I like to back myself, but I also like to back good science, and that's the fundamental thing here.
Yeah.
I really think this molecule, Xanamem, will be an important molecule for Alzheimer's disease, and it will be one of the very few success stories that happen. And the reason I say that is we actually know it works already.
Yeah. And look, for people who've never invested in a biotech company or whatever, a lot of people don't understand that it can take time to actually kick the goal, but along the way, if the goal looks like it's going to be kicked, other people can come in, can't they? Others will want to try and take a slice of the action and all that sort of stuff, and that can power the share price along the way as well.
Yes, absolutely. So because we've got 3 parallel programs and a lot of good clinical data already to de-risk the program, we'll be announcing a series of things, such as the commencement of new trials, new discussions with the FDA, that sort of thing. So there should be steady news flow throughout the next 12 months, including the positive results I would predict of the Xanamem Part A study.
Okay, you haven't got the answer to this question. I'm still going to ask it because people out there want to know, how long do you reckon before you'll either get, well, we want the true positive, obviously you do. How long do you reckon you're going to need to prove it to yourself first before you then go to the FDA for the big thumbs up?
So for Alzheimer's disease, it depends on the stage of the disease that you study, but you'll need several thousand patients to do the approvals.
Yeah.
So that will take quite a few years,
Yeah.
right? So, however, we have another program in Fragile X, which has something called a rare pediatric designation, and that is our fast to market strategy. Because it's a small rare disease in adolescents, or children, adolescents and adults, we can get to the market much faster. So that could be in half the time it might take for Alzheimer's disease, for example.
Okay.
And our third indication, we'll talk about later.
Okay. Well, one last question. Is there a better question I should have asked you that my inexperience has resulted in me not asking the good question?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Not really. I think we've brought out the story of why I am bullish about this molecule and why I think it will be an important molecule for patients, and why I've taken the job and backed myself and the company. I guess the other thing to say is we do have an experienced board and a really good small team and some really high quality global consultants helping us. So even though we're a small Australian company, we actually have 30 or 40 really heavyweight people around the world helping us on these programs.
Well, Steve, good luck.
Thank you so much.
Steve Gourlay, who's the CEO and MD of Actinogen.